Hey everybody, it's Nate Charles and welcome back to the Rule of Law Brief. So earlier today I posted a meme poking fun at the definition of communism, and then it occurred to me this is something we actually need to talk about. So let's start with the actual authoritative definitions, because everything else in this discussion basically flows from that. So communism, according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, is a doctrine based on revolutionary Marxian socialism and Marxism-Leninism, also defined as a totalitarian system of government in which a single authoritarian party controls state-owned means of production. Keep that in mind. Owns the means of production, and a final stage of society in Marxist theory in which the state has withered away and economic goods are distributed equitably. Communism, in other words, requires eliminating private property, collective or state ownership of all productive forces, and in theory, the disappearance of the state entirely. So let's talk about socialism. Merriam-Webster defines socialism as any of various egalitarian economic and political theories or movements advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and the distribution of goods, or a system in which there is no private property, or a system in which the means of production are owned or controlled by the state. So socialism in its technical meaning is about ownership, specifically public or collective ownership of major industries and productive assets. All right, now let's take a look at the definition of government. So according to Merriam-Webster, government is defined as the organization, machinery, or agency through which a political unit exercises authority and performs function. So, and this is important, government, by its very definition, taxes people and uses the revenue to perform public functions. That's simply what governments do. So my point here is actually that both sides, both the left and the right, are misusing the terms socialism and communism to their detriment, and definitely to the detriment of the United States as a whole. So now that we have the real definitions, here's where things break down. The modern political right in the United States rarely uses these words correctly. When someone on the right calls a policy socialist or communist, they're not talking about collective ownership of industry or the abolition of private property. They're not even really talking about an economic system at all. At best, what they're actually criticizing, usually without saying it outright, is authoritarianism. They are reaching back to the historical examples of the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China, regimes that called themselves communist or socialist and attempted to build centrally planned economies. Those attempts naturally required enormous centralized power, which produced one-party rule, pervasive surveillance, coercion and repression, and a state apparatus that dictated virtually every aspect of daily life. These systems failed not because of economic theory, but because central planning at that scale required an enormous amount of coercive authority. When the state controls all the production and all the distribution of goods and services, it inevitably controls people's lives. And that's where the brutality came in. The authoritarianism wasn't a side effect. It was structurally baked in. So when modern conservatives slap the label communism or socialism onto healthcare policy or a tax policy or a regulatory framework, they're not making an economic argument. They're signaling an emotional reaction to the authoritarianism of 20th century regimes that identify themselves as communist or socialist. It's a critique of state coercion, not a critique of collective ownership. It's fear of authoritarian government, not technical socialism or communism. And because the vocabulary is wrong, the critique lands in the wrong place. It derails substantive debate before it even begins. But the left also misuses the term socialism. A lot of progressives today enthusiastically call themselves socialists. But when they explain what they actually support, universal health care, tuition-free college, stronger regulation of big business, expanded welfare programs, none of that actually matches the definition of socialism. They're not advocating for the abolition of private property. They're not advocating for state ownership of factories, public ownership of all major industries, collective control of the means of production. What they're describing is a regulated market economy with a robust social safety net. That's not socialism. That's literally the definition of government, the organization through which a political unit exercises authority and performs its basic functions. Every government in human history has taxed its population and performed public functions using that revenue. If you use that as the definition for socialism, then every civilization that has ever existed becomes socialist. By misusing the term socialism, the left is actually muddying its message and handing its critics a label to weaponize. So the upshot here is that both sides, left and right, are misusing these terms so badly that the words have become almost useless in political debate. And that's enormously problematic. The right uses the terms socialism and communism as shorthand for authoritarianism, not any legitimate economic theory. The left uses the term socialism to describe basic governance and redistributive policies, not collective ownership. This linguistic sloppiness prevents honest and practical conversations about how we regulate markets, how we balance public and private interests, and how we solve real problems. The words matter. When we misuse them, we're not educating anybody. We're just deepening divisions unnecessarily and sometimes against our own interests and ensuring that no productive solutions ever emerge. We can have well-meaning debates about what is good policy, what is good regulation, what is harmful regulation, what is good expenditure, and what is bad expenditure. But we need to engage with the nuance of those policies. We can't just slap broad terms on them, especially if those terms are inaccurate. And we definitely shouldn't do it to ourselves. If you consider yourself to be progressive, don't identify yourself as a socialist. Because one, you're not, probably. And two, you're just handing the other side an axe to beat you over the head with. Don't do it. Words matter. Nuance matters. Let's have enlightened debate and stop it with this nonsense.